All right, let's dive into one of the biggest, most profound questions out there, one that has fascinated and puzzled us for all of human history. What exactly is the soul?
For literally thousands of years, the brightest minds have been wrestling with these very questions, trying to get to the bottom of our own essence. It's a mystery that really sits at the very heart of what it means to be human. So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to take a journey through two of the world's great intellectual traditions, Western and Islamic philosophy, to see how they each tried to crack this deep and complex puzzle.
Okay, so first things first, why are we even talking about this? Why does the idea of the soul matter so much? Well, because this isn't just some philosophical side quest. It's one of the oldest and most fundamental problems that both religion and philosophy share. It's an investigation into the very source of life itself. Now, let's start our journey in the West. We have to go all the way back to ancient Greece, where the very first attempts to figure out what the soul is were actually rooted in the physical world around them. So you have to understand, the concept of the soul in the West wasn't static. It changed a lot. Early on, you had thinkers like Thales who imagined the soul as something physical, like a fine wind or air that animates things. But that pretty simple, material view was about to get completely turned on its head. But then, everything changed. And I mean everything. Socrates and Plato came along and basically threw that old idea out the window. They argued that the soul wasn't just the life force of the body. It was an immaterial, immortal essence. This single idea was absolutely revolutionary, and it would echo through Western thought for the next 2,000 years. Plato had this really powerful and famous image for it. He said the body is a prison for the soul. He believed our souls came from a perfect heavenly world of ideas, and after falling into the physical world, they got trapped here, always longing to get back to their pure spiritual home.
He also envisioned the soul having three distinct parts, and his analogy for it is just brilliant. Picture a chariot. Reason is the driver, trying to steer. The spirited part is a noble horse, full of courage and honor. But the appetitive part is this wild, unruly horse, always pulling towards earthly pleasures. For Plato, living a good life was all about reason getting those two horses under control.
Now, Plato's own student, Aristotle, looked at all this and said, hang on a minute. He took a totally different path. For him, the soul wasn't a prisoner at all. It was the very form of the body, its entelechy. Think of it like this. You can't have a statue without the shape, and you can't have the shape without the bronze. For Aristotle, the soul and body were just like that, inseparable. And you know what? This ancient debate between Plato and Aristotle is basically still with us today, just with new names. It eventually split modern philosophy down the middle. On one side, you have the spiritualists who see the soul as a real, non-physical life force. And on the other, you have materialists who argue that the soul is just what the brain does, and when the body dies, that's it. Game over. Okay, so that's the Western side of the story. Now let's switch gears completely. How did the rich tradition of Islamic thought tackle these same enormous questions about the soul? Well, right from the start, the foundational understanding in Islam comes from the Quran. It says the soul originates from the command of the Lord. What that means is its true, ultimate nature is a mystery. Something the human mind just can't fully wrap itself around. But even though its deep in nature is a mystery, Islamic scholars did outline some key attributes. They defined the soul as the immortal, thinking essence of a person. It's the home of our consciousness, that indivisible I that feels like the same you, even as your body changes over your whole life. And this is where things get really interesting, because, does this sound familiar? Islamic thinkers also describe the soul as working through three main forces: the intellectual, the defensive, and the appetitive. A lot like Plato's chariot, right? The goal, just like in Plato's model, is to have these forces working in harmony, all guided by reason. So let's put it all together. How did these two incredible traditions, Western and Islamic, interact? They were often reading the same Greek sources, but wow, did they come to some very different conclusions. This table really lays it out perfectly. Take the soul-body relationship. For Plato, remember, the body's a prison. But for a giant of Islamic philosophy like Ibn Sina, the body is a crucial instrument, a tool the soul actually needs to perfect itself. That is a fundamental difference. And while both believed in immortality, Islamic philosophy completely rejected Plato's idea of reincarnation. And it wasn't like everyone in the Islamic tradition agreed either. You had these really intense debates going on. Al-Farabi, for example, argued that after we die, our individual souls might just merge back into one big universal soul. But later thinkers like Ibn Sina and Al-Ghazali pushed back hard, insisting that our immortality is individual, that your unique self continues on. This led to a huge point of tension. If philosophers are saying the soul is purely spiritual, how do you square that with the scriptural promise of a bodily resurrection? Philosophers like Ibn Sina really struggled with this. But then theologians like Al-Ghazali came along and argued that philosophy was missing the point. For him, there was no problem. God is all-powerful and can simply bring the body back, allowing for a full spiritual and physical afterlife. Okay, we've covered thousands of years, two massive intellectual traditions, and some of the deepest questions imaginable. So, after this incredible journey, where does that leave us? What's the bottom line? Well, what's pretty amazing is that after all that debate, both traditions kind of end up in a similar place, a place of humility. The idea is that we can see the soul's effects, our thoughts, our consciousness, our feelings, but its true nature, its ultimate reality, that remains a secret our minds can't fully unlock. And this whole quest, it is definitely not over. Today, we might use different words. We talk about consciousness or the self, but we're still asking those same fundamental questions. The ancient search just continues in modern labs, universities, and places of worship. So in the end, we're not going to give you an answer. Instead, we're handing the question back to you. After this whole journey, after hearing from some of the greatest minds in history, what does the soul mean to you?